Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.
And I listen to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast.
Thank God. I started on mute again, just running my mouth, and I was on mute. Ah, boy. My name is Rachel St. Patrick here at one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and welcome back to another live call-in show. We're going to have to start rebranding this one. Stop calling it the Caribbean Cricket Podcast live call-in show and just call it the Caribbean Cricket Podcast radio show, because that's what these things turn into. People just, click the link and start saying their recklessness, and we move, If this is the first time you've ever listened to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, look at the ticker tape below. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Carib Cricket. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We're on the road to 5K. We'll get there slowly but surely. If you'd like to support us on a financial level, because you're the only sponsors we've got, head to www.patreon.com/Carib Cricket. Thank you to Ayana, who became a Patreon today. Every little bit counts, people. As little as £2, 2 yen, 2 rupee, 2 euros, 2 whatever your currency is. Just keeps us going, If it helps us buy a coffee, all the better. But it's down to you lot, you the supporters, that keep us going in essence and make this worth our while and not shut it all down, But anyways, we're here, we're back. The time in the UK right now is 25 minutes past 10. You lot will not take me to midnight tonight. No. We got to lock this thing off by 11:30 at the very latest. 1 hour maximum for today's live show. You're not taking me to midnight, people. No chance. But that notwithstanding, we're doing the live today because the original plan this morning was I was going to do just a recorded video, and it was going to be on the West Indies women's team. Obviously, we lost to England. In fact, we got trounced by England a couple of days ago, and I was like, listen, I haven't put any West Indies women's content up on the channel for a while. Let me just do something specific to them. Then I realized I hadn't even really touched on the West Indies test match thus far against Zimbabwe. Obviously, we're on Twitter. We update things on Twitter and Instagram, etc. But I hadn't actually done any video on that. And then I got a text message. So let me start there. I'm going to start there because there's never a dull day in West Indies cricket. Santoki and I have been discussing this one via WhatsApp. Santoki can't be on the show at the moment because he's not available, which is why I've got to kind of do these lives. But I got a WhatsApp message. Obviously, I can't reveal my sources. And this was about 6 hours ago. And the message said, have you heard the changes for the South Africa squad? And I replied and said, well, I've been thinking about that. Obviously, they're going to bring in another seamer because that was just obvious. Obviously, they've got to bring in a seamer. So I said that, and the person said, oh, there's 2 changes. And I said, so who's the seamer and what's the other change? And that person said, Warrican's out and Akeem Jordan is in and Bonner is out and Alec Athanaze is in. So that was about 6 hours ago. I think I went on Twitter about half an hour or an hour after that and just said, listen, I've heard a bunch of madness, but I'm not going to air it. Because at that time, I wasn't aware if this was common knowledge yet in the Caribbean, who knew that news, whatever. About 2 hours after that, I said, you know what, bun that. Let me just drop what I've been told. If it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. And I kind of, if you follow our Twitter handle, I was basically saying, this is mad. I'm going to have to record an emergency pod looking at this. So before we get into the test match against Zimbabwe and we look at that, before we get into the women's kind of World Cup campaign thus far, let's just talk about those proposed changes. Now, it's worth pointing out that this is not official. It's not confirmed news. In terms of West Indies, Cricket West Indies haven't dropped an official squad announcement or official statement saying, here are the changes for the South Africa tour. But I can 100% say that Athanaze is definitely in the squad. I've corroborated that with various different people. Athanaze is 100% in the squad. The only one that I haven't had corroborated yet is whether Akeem Jordan is in. But again, from the people that I've spoken to, all things look to Akeem Jordan getting in the squad as well. But Athanaze 100% is in. As far as I understand it, Bonner is out. But like I say, until I get official confirmation, I'm hesitant to go with it. But go with it, we must all the same. Before I bring anybody in onto the live, let me just give you my kind of piece on this. I need this sweet at the same time. My piece on it is this. Anybody who's been following our site for the Caribbean Cricket Podcast for the last however long, in fact, if you even go back to last year's Super 50, for those of you who are kind of like long-term listeners to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, as far back as then and even before, I'd been talking about Athanaze. And I'd been saying that Athanaze, if West Indies selectors have got any sense, they'll call someone like Athanaze up sooner rather than later. I said the other day that I didn't think West Indies selectors would have sense to call Athanaze up for at least 2 to 3 years, by which point it would be too late. Or not too late, but just like they wouldn't recognize what they have in front of them. Obviously, I wrote that article for the official West Indies website on Alec Athanaze after his good form in the Super 50 for the Windward Islands. And so this is somebody who, for me, has been coming off a like a long run in. He's not just appeared all of a sudden. He's not just got 141 all of a sudden in the Red Ball Domestic Championship, in addition to a 40 and a 50 and so on and so forth. He's not just come from nowhere. Athanaze was the top run scorer in the 2018 Under-19 World Cup. This guy his potential has been clear for the longest while. Obviously, we know that in West Indies cricket, when you're talented at under-19 level, it can sometimes take a while for that potential to show itself properly at the senior level. So I can't try and do a full 180 now and be like, well, boy, I don't know what Athanaze is doing in the squad, because I'm the same person who was saying on videos this week, last week, however many months back, I hope the selectors see that there's serious potential in Athanaze. So I can't do a 180 and be a hypocrite, but I can do the following. If you're going to call Athanaze up to the West Indies squad, I have two major... I think I got 2 or 3 major issues with this selection. If you're calling Athanaze, you take him to Zimbabwe. We knew, and Santoki and I did a big video on this, big live, big everything. We knew we were going to Zimbabwe. We know that the Zimbabwe series counts for nothing. It's not part of the World Test Championship. There's nothing really riding on it apart from the pride of winning or losing the series. It was a perfect It was a perfect developmental opportunity for a couple of younger players to go on tour, whether batters or bowlers. That was what the Zimbabwe tour should have been used for. Hear me out, people, because I'm going somewhere with this one. Like the video, by the way. Subscribe to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. They took a squad to Zimbabwe that was super experienced. There wasn't one name on that Zimbabwe squad list that was a young player who had a potential kind of great upside that we were taking a gamble on or we were giving international experience to. We took the most experienced side relative to international experience and kind of already within the kind of test setup to Zimbabwe. At the time, Santoki and I said, what's the point of that? We know we're going to South Africa next. The squad that we take to South Africa should be our most experienced squad. It counts for World Test Championship points. Yes, we can't make the final, but it's a seriously hard test. There is nobody who can tell me that there is clear cricketing rationale that has gone into this selection of Alec Athanaze. There is nobody who can tell me that, because if there was, he would have been selected for Zimbabwe. And check this, I'm going to go further. I would even postulate the view that Athanaze wasn't even on their radar when they picked the squad for Zimbabwe, because if he was on their radar, he would have gone to Zimbabwe because he's a youngster. He's got huge potential upside. If he was on their radar already, he would have been picked in the Zimbabwe squad. I postulate he wasn't even on their radar. I would go further and say this is purely a vibes pick. How about that? This is nothing more than vibes. There's no cricket logic. There's no cricket rationale to this selection. And I want Athanaze in and around it, but I can't say I can't say that there's clear cricket rationale and logic to this, because if there was, you wouldn't pick Athanaze to go to South Africa. You just wouldn't. You wouldn't. And more importantly, you wouldn't drop one of your more experienced test batters who averages 38. You wouldn't drop an experienced test batter, 15 test matches, average of 38, to pick a youngster to go to South Africa? You would for Zimbabwe, you wouldn't for South Africa. So that tells me that the selectors have done nothing more than looked at the first 2 rounds of West Indies Championship, looked at a couple of batters, swirled their hand around in a bowl, and picked one name out of the bowl. They can't tell me nothing different. They can't tell me nothing different because there's no clear process and rationale to this decision making. I'm glad he's about because I like Alec Athanaze. I think he's a very good player, but there is no cricketing rationale. There is no cricketing logic for this pick, much less you then drop Bonner for it as well. Come on, man. Come on. Come on. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. I bet you there's no press conference after this. There can't be. Because, and if there is a press conference after they've announced the South Africa squad, I've basically, if I'm not in it, because I may not be available, any journalist, Caribbean journalist who's listening to this, I've just given you the key talking points you have to raise to Desmond Haynes. Fundamentally, you have to say to him, what was the logic and rationale for this? What was the process you followed for this? Was Athanaze on your radar before this South Africa tour? And if he was, why didn't you pick him for Zimbabwe? Why would you wait to South Africa and drop an experienced batter for him? An experienced batter who you took to Zimbabwe to carry drinks, and then you drop him. So what has Bonner done to justify the drop? Bonner hadn't even done anything to justify being dropped for the Zimbabwe tests. So what's he done since being in Zimbabwe to now justify not going to South Africa? Whose mum has he cussed out? Whose granny has he cussed out? Because there's no cricket logic to this. There's none. There's none. None. There's a couple of comments in here. Damien says Athanaze plays pace fairly good, so I wouldn't say that I would bring him in though, and something for me have to be going on. Yeah, something's got to be going on because there's no logic. There's no logic. There's unless, okay, hold on. Let me refresh. Unless Bonner is injured, and in fairness, let me try and be balanced. Unless Bonner is injured, if Bonner is injured, then I might understand the decision making. But if Bonner is injured, what's he still doing in Zimbabwe then? What's he still doing in Zimbabwe holding drinks? Wouldn't you have already called someone to Zimbabwe to replace him? Like I say, this will all come out in the ether. I'd love to believe that there is a clear selection rationale that has been used to justify Athanaze's pick, but I suspect that this is vibes and vibes alone. I want Athanaze in and around it. Please don't get me wrong, people. Don't get what I'm saying twisted. I believe that Alec Athanaze is a future West Indies batter of serious talent and potential who I thought would get into the test setup in about the next year or so. You'd pick a man to go to South Africa when you had Zimbabwe to use to blood him in. Let me drink my water. Ah, boy. Michael says, if Bonner is injured? I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm saying he better be injured because there's no other rationale to justify what they're doing. I can't find it. Damien says Bonner didn't look himself in the warm-up game, but neither did Reefer, and somehow Reefer got into the team. Go look up the warm-up game scores. No one made any scores out of those two. So how did Reefer get in? Come on, man. Like, come on. Anyway, so that's the Athanase is he left? He's left-handed, isn't he? He's left-handed. Correct me if I'm wrong, people, but Athanase is left-handed. But listen, like I say, fundamentally, hold on. Okay, let me deal with some comments. Anad says, you in a tweet said Multi was recognized late in his career. What is wrong with this selection? You're not understanding the point I'm making. There is nothing wrong with Athanase getting recognized. What I'm trying to say to you is there is no process being followed. At the end of the day, Anad, with respect, I say this with respect, you have to have a process. Players have to know why a man is getting selected. This is no different to me to how Yannick Correa randomly ended up in the T20 squad just out of nowhere. Pure vibes. Yannick Correa on the eve of the World Cup just lands in the T20 World Cup squad. Hadn't played T20 in time. Now, obviously, some will say, but Mash, no, that doesn't work because Athanase has played first-class cricket. Yes, I hear that. But you've got to look at the context of who he's replacing. You've got to look at the context that we had Zimbabwe to... So if you wanted to select him, you would have selected him for Zimbabwe first. There's no rationale. There's no clear logic and process that you can tell me is clearly being followed here. Trust me, people, it's vibes. It's pure vibes. And I've got nothing... do you know what? I've got nothing wrong with vibes if a man just admits to me that it's vibes. Just tell me it's vibes and I'm cool. Just tell me it's pure vibes that we're using to pick the team and I'm cool with that. Because from an objective perspective, it looks like vibes to me. So that's Athanase. The other pick that I've been told, which may or may not be true, like I say, I've got to wait for official confirmation, but working on the assumption that it is true, is that Akeem Jordan is going to be... let's start again. We always knew that there was going to be an additional pacer selected to go to South Africa. And this goes to the last video I did, the last live I did, where I said to people, there is no way we can rotate Joseph, Roach and Gabriel alone. Obviously, we've got Holder and Mayers and whatever, but Joseph, Roach and Gabriel are the three frontline bowlers. And if you remember in the last live, I said there's no way that those three can go warm-up game to first test to second test to warm-up game to first test to second test. There has to be another pacer added to the squad to take some workload off those fast bowlers and ensure that people can actually get appropriate rest. So I always knew that an extra pacer was surely going to get called up to go to South Africa. But check this now, people. Someone tell me how Akeem Jordan has jumped the queue. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. If anybody watched the last video I did, I dropped it yesterday. It was looking at round 2. I did a summary of the West Indies Championship thus far, and a summary of the top 5 batters and bowlers. As things currently stand in the West Indies Championship, Akeem Jordan is the top wicket taker. He's taken 12 wickets. He's the top. Sorry, he's not only the top wicket taker. He's the top wicket taking seamer in the competition. He's taken 12 wickets. That's largely off the back of the fact that he took 7 in the last game against Jamaica, right? So it's the top wicket taker. But I would actually argue, people, that Akeem Jordan's pick is vibes as well. I'd argue that's a vibes pick as well. If he's going, and that's the pacer they've taken, this is the explanation I want people to... I want people to clearly give me a cricketing rationale that says to me how Akeem Jordan jumped the queue over Marquino Minley. Give me a clear cricket rationale, people, other than the fact that he's the top wicket taker after 2 rounds of the first class championship this year. In Akeem Jordan's... And don't... if you watch my last video, I like Akeem Jordan. I think he's a good swing bowler. I think he gets good lateral... If there's anything on offer, he gets really good lateral movement, right? Particularly with the new ball. So I'm not saying Akeem Jordan's not a good bowler. He is. But in that video I did yesterday, I said that based on what Hakeem Jordan had done thus far and based on what he'd produced in Super 50 in consecutive seasons, I said I expected to see Hakeem Jordan in the Headley versus Week series at the end of the domestic championship. And I expected him to, at least at the bare minimum, be in the West Indies A team that goes on tour. I think it's to Bangladesh later on this year. The reason why I said I do not expect to see Hakeem Jordan in the Test side is he's only played 2 games in this year's championship. He's played a total of 5 games in first-class cricket. Now, before anyone says to me, oh, but Mash, there's reasons. Here's why there's no reasons. The Pacers we took to Australia, right? We took Kimar Roach, Alzari Joseph, Anderson Phillip, right? Do you remember? It literally was only 2 months ago. When Roach got injured in Australia, we called for Marquino Mindley. We called for Marquino Mindley to fly from Jamaica to Australia because Marquino Mindley is the next bowler off the rank who's kind of been biding his time and waiting. And even after Marquino Mindley, you've probably got Jeremiah Louis from the Leeward Islands, right? They've been patiently biding their time. They're the next 2 bowlers who, when you go back and study the stats and the facts, have consistently put numbers up in first-class cricket, have represented West Indies A, just like Anderson Phillip had been doing so. So Mindley and Louis, it's probably their time next. How did Hakeem Jordan just jump past them, people? How did Hakeem Jordan jump past Mindley and Louis after 2 first-class games this season? Someone make all of this make sense. Make it make sense. Where's the selection rationale and logic? How's that? Where's my water? Is it a vibes thing we're on? Is it just pure vibes? Is it pure vibes we're on? Anderson Phillip, so Paul is correct. Anderson Phillip obviously is injured. He's not bowled for Trinidad in the first 2 rounds of the first class championship. So I get how he jumps past Phillip. Marquino Mindley has bowled for Jamaica in the first 2 rounds of the first class championship. I think he's taken 6 wickets so far, right? My point being, okay, yeah, Akeem's taken 12 wickets, Mindley's only taken 6. But there must have been a reason why when Roach broke down in Australia, you flew Mindley from Jamaica all the way to Australia. There must have been a selection rationale for that, right? So what happened then between him flying all the way to Australia? Yes, he got injured, but he's now playing in the first class championship. What happened between him flying to Australia and you recognizing that he's next to now looking at it and going, well, boy, forget Mindley, Hakeem Jordan is next? Someone, please, in the chat, give me clear rationale to explain the justification for that. I just want a rationale. I'm not saying I'm anti what the selectors have done because I think Hakeem Jordan is a good bowler. I think he needs he needs a yard extra of pace, but he's a good bowler. Ali Cathanes, I think is a good batter, but I just need a clear rationale that I can turn round to a next man and say, that's why they got picked. The whole point of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast as this media initiative is to try and come with like clear stats and facts and clear reasoning and justification for everything that goes on in West Indies cricket. The more and more I look at selections in West Indies cricket, the more I don't understand what's going on. The more I just think and go, well, is this vibes? Are we just on vibes? A man just basically puts his hand into a crystal ball, picks out a name and goes, it's that man's time now. So here's a couple of defenders for Hakeem Jordan. So Gazelle says Jordan's all-round ability. We need to stop. If that's the justification, Gazelle, we need to stop picking players based on all-round ability. The man's not going to be an all-rounder. He's going to be a bowler. In the same way how Roston Chase isn't picked because he's an all-rounder. He's picked. If you're in the top 6, you're picked to bat. And he did today. He batted. He got his highest score in 4 years with a score of 70. That's because you're in the top 6. Bat like you're in the top 6. I'm not picking Hakeem Jordan because he might be able to bat a little bit as well. That's nonsense. I'm picking a fast bowler because I want a fast bowler. That's your primary suit. So that's what I'm picking you for. Shane says maybe Jordan's skill set brings variety to the bowling lineup. Yeah, he can swing the ball both ways. He gets lateral movement with the new ball. But check this, so does Carl Mayers. So I hear you. I'd rather they just picked a quicker bowler. And again, I'm not trying to fight down Akeem Jordan. I think he is a good bowler. I just want answers as to how he jumped the queue. That's all I want answers for. Okay, boy. Yeah. There's one thing I haven't said yet, which is the obvious thing that I want to say, but I'm leaving it. I'm just gonna call it vibes. Just gonna call it vibes for now. Like I say, someone has just put in the chat, are these confirmed picks? None of this is confirmed. So a lot of you could argue and say, Mash, how are you doing a video and these aren't even confirmed picks? And I could have egg on my face. Come tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon UK time when Cricket West Indies do drop the squad, I could have egg on my face. Maybe Desmond Haynes is watching this saying, you know what, bun this guy. Let me change the squad at the last minute to make him look like a fool. But whatever. As I understand it, I am 100% certain. I can guarantee you that Alec Athanaze is 100% in the squad. That's not rumor. That's not wait for the confirmation. I can 100% tell you who's in the squad. The only one that I can't 100% say it is Akeem Jordan, although everybody I've spoken to has also told me that's happening as well. But Athanaze is the only one I can guarantee is 100% happening. And as I understand it, Bonner is the one who has been dropped. Like I say, I pray and hope that Bonner hasn't, well, I don't hope he's got an injury, but I hope there is a reason. I hope there's a reason and a justification for Bonner being dropped from the squad, like a proper one, like he's injured or something, because it makes no sense. It didn't even make sense how Bonner's not in the team for Zimbabwe in terms of actually in the starting 11, much less he now gets dropped for South Africa. The friend that I was speaking to earlier on, and here's the last thing I'll say on this whole issue. The friend who initially told me the news about Bonner getting dropped and Athanaze getting in and Akeem Jordan getting in, I said to them, what do you make of the fact that Reefer got into the team ahead of Bonner? And his response was they feel that Haynes and Cole succumbed to public pressure. So, you know, all that stuff about people who were saying beforehand, well, Bonner can't play pace, we must drop Bonner. He reckons that Reefer got in because Haynes and Cole succumbed to pressure and kind of, whether it's to please the public or whatnot, or they believe the public hype that Bonner is suddenly a weak batter. That's why Bonner's not in the team. But that doesn't explain to me why Bonner wouldn't go to South Africa. Why take him to Zimbabwe? Why waste a pick? I'm tired of the nonsense, man. I'm tired of the nonsense. Let me put the link in the live. Anybody want to come in and just chat about that? Bear in mind, there's 3 topics for today's live. So that's the kind of rumored selections for South Africa. I also want to touch on the Women's World Cup, and I want to touch on obviously the test match against Zimbabwe thus far. So let me just put the link in the live. Sorry, in the chat rather. And if you want to come in and talk about those selections and give me some kind of clear rationale that justifies it, be my guest. But people, if you're just joining in the live, you're not taking me to midnight tonight. No. That's not happening tonight. Allow me and let me go to my bed. 75 of you in the live. I hope there's 75 likes. I hope there's some new subscribers. All of that. Anyways, the link to come on the show is in the chat. If you want to come in and talk your shit, click that link and you can come and talk your shit as well. Do you know what, Vish? Here's the thing as well about that comment you're making. When everybody cusses Bonner and says Bonner can't play pace, the reply I always give to people is no one in the Caribbean can play pace. So I always found it baffling when people were like, oh, Bonner can't play high quality pace. When South Africa blew us away last year? No, 2 years ago now. When South Africa blew us away in 2021, when they won those 2 test matches, nobody could play high pace. Everyone go back and look at the scorecards for that South Africa series in the Caribbean. I think we made no score higher than 160, right? Everybody struggled in the face of Nortje, Rabada, Ngidi, and Maharaj for that matter. So when people say to me, "Oh, but Bonner can't play pace," I'm thinking, so who can? Who's this mythical West Indian batter that people are thinking can play high quality pace? And that's why I don't buy the foolishness around Bonner. A man gets licked in his head and all of a sudden he can't play pace as if anybody else can play pace. Just because they didn't get licked in their head. Did they not score single-digit scores as well? Ah, boy. Anyways, I'm going to move on. Whilst wait for people who do want to come in, let's move on to... Oh, no, there's someone. Sheldon's here. One sec. Right, I'm going to bring Sheldon on. Let me bring him on. 1 second, people. Yes, Sheldon, how you doing?
Good night, Marsh. How things in cool England?
Do you know what? Just before I pressed live, I was like, should I turn the heating on for this show? But I already knew that I was too heated in my head anyway with what I'd heard. So you know, my chat has warmed me up.
All right. Well, my take on the situation is we had to get some sort of middle order to carry to South Africa, because clearly the middle order failed, right? So that we had to look at who is doing well in the present for the competition and take somebody from there. Now, when I add them 2 centuries in the Super 50 from Athens to this century in the 40, it showed potential for me. And therefore, that put him in contention for selection. The only other person who would have been in contention for selection is Michael Bravo. So you have to now decide, do I go with the future or do I try to go safe and go with experience? So that is your choices.
I hear you. I agree with that.
No.
I agree with that.
Now, the thing is, having the recent success of Tage as a new player, right, did very well. Then you as a selector kind of feeling yourself, hey, here's what's going on. I picked Tage and Tage did well. Let me throw in a new player and hope for the best. Because if that new player do well, then all of a sudden you look like a champion selector, and also you start to appease the fans of all these players who say, hey, here's what, you're not giving the young players enough opportunities. So all of a sudden you start to look like a brilliant selector. You're giving opportunity to young players. They're doing well. You're fulfilling your mission, building for the future, and everything going well.
But Sheldon, let me stop you there 1 second. So far, I agree with everything that you're saying there. So then answer this for me. If all of that is what they're doing, why did you not take the youngster to Zimbabwe first then? Are you telling me that they waited to see who would make runs first in the first 2 rounds of the first class championship, and they were going to always pick someone to go to South Africa? Because that doesn't make sense to me, Sheldon, because I guess what I'm trying to say to you is Athens had already scored 2 centuries in Super 50, right? His potential was already there. You have Zimbabwe, who themselves, in fact, Zimbabwe put us to shame. Zimbabwe have blooded 5 or 6 new players for this series because it don't count for anything, right? Why would we? I hear what you're saying. Tage, we blooded Tage, but remember with Tage, by the way, we didn't choose to blood Tage. We had to blood Tage because John Campbell had his ban. They were never going to play Tage in Australia if John Campbell was actually available, right? So yes, they can try and take a win over Tage, right? They blood him in Australia. Tage does well. Are you realistically saying to me that Haynes and Cole are just trying a little vibes thing now with Athens, hoping for the best in terms of South Africa as well?
No, the thing is, right? While Athanaze would have done well in the Super 50 with the 2 centuries, after them 2 centuries, he really didn't do much for the rest of the tournament.
No, he
And
didn't. That's true.
previous to that, in the 4-day tournament, he didn't do very well either.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we going to pick him on potential or performance? So I'm saying, you throw him in the thing, saying, well, hey, here's what, we have you on the radar. So, perform, show us you can perform in the red ball cricket, and you'll get picked.
Okay, I hear that, but then, so Sheldon, so why have they dropped? If it's true, why is Bonner being dropped?
Okay, here's what. Now, Bonner is going to meet some of the fastest bowlers in the world in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
He has not done well against those type of bowlers recently.
Okay.
So, if he did not play in Zimbabwe, which was more suited to his style of batting, then carrying him to South Africa would not have done anything for his personal career. You only carrying the man to be in trouble. It's best he come back to the West Indies. We still have 3 more 4-day games. Let him come there. But if he does well, we still have India coming down here, likely to probably play at the Queen's Park Oval and those sorts of pitches, which he might be able to do well in.
But hold on, no, Sheldon, I must stop you though. Who does well against pace in the Caribbean? Call me one other name in the Caribbean. Call me one name in that test squad who does well against pace. High quality pace. Tell me anybody in that squad. Because Sheldon, when South Africa came to the Caribbean in 2021, they all got licked. They all got skittled over quick time. We only made one innings, we made 90. A next innings, we made 150. A next innings, we made 140. A next innings, we made 160. So I hear you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you haven't got valid points to make about Bonner and the pace, but none of them can play high pace. So are we really in a situation, Sheldon, where we're looking at a batter who averages 38 and we're telling him to go sit back down in the Caribbean because he's no good?
No, getting out the pace and getting hit is 2 different things. Because when you're constantly getting hit, you're 1 hit away from death, or you're 1 hit away from permanent damage, which could affect you for the rest of your life.
I listen. I
So,
hear you.
no.
I hear you. I hear you. Carry on.
So sometimes we need to protect people and so on. So if I have a batsman who constantly getting hit, then, and I am, because Ngidi and Naughty and them ain't making no joke, right?
Yeah.
Them fellas ain't making no joke. I see them fellas Lego some bouncers even in the T20 and had men running.
But then Sheldon, why did we take Bonner to Zimbabwe then? This is my issue. Even if I agree with you, there was no, like, I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Sheldon, is the process has to make sense for me. You don't take Bonner to Zimbabwe to tell him to carry water and then say, well, boy, you're going to get licked down in South Africa, now go home again. Why take the man in the first place?
Because the man on contract, not so. Is he not a contracted player?
So, okay, let me ask you this then. Do you think, let's go back to the beginning. Do you think that Reefer should have played ahead of Bonner in this test series, this current ongoing test series?
No. But Reefer, as we all know, is the captain pick. the captain has said, hey, here's what I am picking Reefer and I am putting him to bat at 3. And that's the end of the matter.
Right. Okay. So do you know what? Do you know what, Sheldon? If that is the case in the matter, then actually I agree with you. Then that means that the rationale is this: they selected the squad. Nkrumah Bonner averages 38. This is your rationale, by the way. I am not in the Caribbean Cricket Podcast is not endorsing this. These are Sheldon's words. So the squad was selected. Craig said, "I want Reefer in the side." Bonner had to hold drinks for 2 matches, and then the selector said, "Well, boy, we know what's going to happen to Bonner if he goes to South Africa. Let's just tell him to go back now to the Caribbean, and we're going to pick a wild card. Well, not wild card, but we're going to pick a youngster to show the region that we're thinking about the future of West Indies." Is that basically the synopsis of your argument?
Yeah, basically, because the thing about it, right? Looking at what likely to happen, because India's supposed to come down here soon, right?
Yes, June.
Believe it or not, I feel that Bravo returning for that series.
I think so too. Yes, I think Bravo will be back.
Yep, returning for that series. So I think that they're working out Bravo, giving him the looking for him to probably score 2 more centuries and get him in full form. Because I'm telling myself that we play in India, the Queen's Park Oval. Bravo home. Best player spin. We good to go.
Okay. Listen, Sheldon, I always love it when you come on, but I'm mindful of the fact that there are some other people
of course
also wanting to come on. Stick around though, Sheldon, because I haven't even got onto the other topics, which is the Women's T20 World Cup and the Zimbabwe series, etc. So if you want to come back in, be my guest, you know?
Yeah.
All right then, no problem. Yes, Sheldon, the great Sheldon. You're always guaranteed good conversation when Sheldon comes on. And the thing is this, though, if I follow Sheldon's line of argument, I actually get that. I'm not saying I agree per se, but I do get that line of argument. I just find it weird that you would... this is the next... I know Frank's in the background, Shane's in the background, Mr. Lover's in the background, so I'll see you all. So this is the next thing I want to throw out to the people who are chatting amongst themselves in the chat and so on and so forth. Here's the next thing I want to throw out. How do you become better at playing pace? Is it not by facing pace? Now, the one thing is this for Bonner. If Bonner goes back to the region to play cricket, he's not facing pace. He's not facing high-quality pace. And in fact, none of them are. The fastest bowlers in the region are currently in Zimbabwe, Alzari Joseph and Shannon Gabriel. So how do you get better at it if you're not playing on tracks which offer it? And that goes for all the West Indian batters, to be honest. So I don't know. And for those West Indian fans of an older vintage, and I say that with full respect, Bonner's not the first West Indian batter to be hit. He's not the first. You lot don't remember when Shiv got licked down by Brett Lee? And we all thought he might be dead for a second. Do you not remember that one? So, and Shiv's one of our greatest batters of all time. I don't remember people saying then, well, boy, Shiv can't play pace. It just sometimes the game's the game. So how... Anyways, let me move on. Frank, let me bring you in. I need to get some water, by the way. Frank, let me bring you in, Frank. How you doing, Frank?
I'm good, man. Listen, okay, I'm just going to stop this whole chat right now. We are vibes. It's vibe stuff right now. So all that thing that you say about facts, the West Indies haven't done facts for years. So we're on vibes. And on vibes, I like Athenaeus coming in. It's nice. That's good vibes.
Yeah.
My question, I guess, is, do you think if he comes in and if he starts, because probably it is Reefer that's going to start, you'd imagine, for South Africa. But if he does come in, does he come in at 3? Does he? Because he's batting. Has he not batted at like 5 for the Windwards? Although it depends, I suppose, match dependent maybe. But
so the whole thing about Reefer batting 3. This is my understanding. If there's any Barbadians in the chat, by all means, correct us in the chat if I get this wrong. When Guyana won 5 in a row, the domestic championship, Reefer was kind of an integral part of that Guyana side. And again, for the Guyanese that are in the chat, correct me. But in that side, in those kind of Guyana champion sides, Reefer tended to bat around 5, 6, 7, right? Probably 6 or 7, to be fair. Because back in those days, Reefer was seen for what he actually is, which is, I guess, a bowling all-rounder who's handy with the bat. When the Pride picked Reefer and he went back home, Barbados Pride, the last first-class season we had, they promoted Reefer to bat at 3. So in Reefer's, to give Reefer his due, him batting 3 hasn't come out of thin air. Barbados promoted him to 3. As I understand it, I'm not privy to the private conversations that went on, but as I understand it, for Reefer, he himself has identified the only way he can force his way into the West Indies side is if he focuses on his batting. So, because remember, as an all-rounder, he's in direct competition with Jason Holder, who will never get a drop, Carl Mayers, who is unlikely to get a drop. So, with respect to Reefer, it doesn't matter what he does as an all-rounder, he will never play ahead of those two. One of those two would have to be injured, if not both, right? So, Reefer identified in the last first-class season, I've got to bat up the order and I've got to put runs up to justify again as the West Indies side. And again, to give him his due, I think he played 8 or 7 first-class matches. He averaged high 40s and scored 350s. That's why he's got into the squad. Does that mean, now here's to answer your question, does that make Raymond Reefer a number 3 batter? No.
No, it does not.
It's West Indies.
The thought of Raymond Reefer coming in against Rabada and Nokia with a shiny ball, if either Craig or Tage gets out early, it doesn't fill me with too much confidence, to be fair. No, to be fair, no batter in the region really facing Nokia and Rabada would fill me up with too much confidence.
Exactly. And I think this is where I go full circle back to Nkrumah Bonner. Yes, again, I know people say lick down with the ball, but the one thing that Nkrumah Bonner has made his name for in his kind of early test career is after Craig and Tage, he's the only other batter in the side who has consistently shown he'll bat long. Even when Australia licked him down in the first test last year, he made 16 off 50 balls. Like he was still there. He was still there. I think people, sometimes I feel like people are like, well, he got licked down and he made no runs. Like he was still there trying to grind it out. So I feel Nkrumah Bonner is kind of suffering from the fact that we tour with a small squad. Because I think if we were like an Australia and England or something, then I think there would be room to bring Nkrumah Bonner and maybe say to him, show us that you can bat this year. And if he does get hit and if he gets concussed, well, then we have Athanaze there as well. Yeah,
but it's the most difficult thing when you're trying to figure out a squad, and there only are 15, 16 spaces. It's really tough, and because then you have to kind of because I would want to see. I like Akeem Jordan being in the squad. I don't know if I would again if he was in a bigger squad. That'd be brilliant. Get him over to the tracks, get him experience with all of that there. Same with Athanaze. Again, bring Bravo, but unfortunately, just with the way the West Indies is, you have to make harsh choices. And I guess they felt that he couldn't, like they were not going to risk him. So I don't know. It seems very harsh on Bonner, but I would have rather have brought both Bonner and Athanaze.
Well, that's the thing. That's exactly my thing. Yeah.
And if Bonner got hit, then and then if Bonner did get hit. Because I don't know if 2 times is enough to say there's a trend in it. If Bonner got hit again and got concussed again, well, 3 times in 3 different scenarios, then it's like, well, I think you do have an issue and you need to figure that out really before, even for your own health, because getting hit in the head with cricket ball is not good for you. So,
I mean, he's clearly not concussed right now, because how on they wouldn't have taken him to
Yeah.
Zimbabwe, right?
Yeah, why? The thing that I don't understand, but again, you need to purge this. To live a happy life as a West Indies fan, you need to purge the things of like thinking that people will think about facts in the administration and reason. You need to get it's just vibes. So I guess they saw Reef again. You know what? I might agree with Sheldon. With again, it's a Craig vibe pick. It's like, yeah, he's Asian. Let's go.
Listen,
But
Santoki texted me something earlier on, and I said to him, "It's wild," but I think Santoki's got a point. If it's true and Bonner's going home and he's not going to South Africa, that could be his career done. That's the real, and we could potentially be ending his career after 15 Test matches where he averages 38, where I've forgotten the stats that I put up the other day, but it's something like over 50%, it might even be 60% of the innings he's faced for West Indies, he's batted 100 balls or more. And before anyone says so, come on.
there's no one else.
See why I'm saying
outside,
that, right?
outside the top two, there's literally
so we are
none
in
of them.
danger of ending this guy's career, because if he goes home and misses South Africa, and let's just say people score in his absence, he's not coming back for India. No. He's not coming back. And then that's it. He's 34 years old. So we effectively just ended the guy's career for no reason.
I'm not going to lie, right? Because I think the eye test is important. So there is part of me, to be fair, as much as I like the idea of like, we're going to pick on facts, on runs, on performance, there is part of me that still is like, you have to pass the eye test. You have to look the part.
Mm-hmm.
Man, one of the saddest... I was so conflicted. I always want West Indians to do well whenever I watch them. But Reefer getting his half century, whenever that happened, I was like, oh man, he's going to South Africa. He's going to South Africa. Like, I want us to win.
I cannot possibly comment on this.
But at the same time, I'm like, I can see him bat and against Zimbabwe. And I just don't think he doesn't pass the eye test for me.
Do you know what it is though? Do you know what it is with Reefer? And I say this, some might take this.
And to be fair, I want to also say I think he is a good cricketer. Just to be
right, that's what I was about to say. So
completely fair, he is a very, very good cricketer, particularly in the region. There's a reason why he's there. Like he has put up the numbers to put himself in that position. I think just the West Indies aren't going to be treating him well, sending him to batting at 3 in South Africa and potentially then India. And if he's still about, then Australia away again. But,
all I will say is this: I would encourage people after this live or tomorrow, if you're watching this on the replay, whatever, go back and watch the dismissals from the Bangladesh series last year. I know we won that series easily 2-0, but go and watch the dismissals back from that last series, and you'll see that I have some serious doubts about playing the moving ball. That's all I will say. I just urge some people to go and watch some of the dismissals last year, and you may see what I mean. But listen, at the end of the day, what I will say about Reefer is he's an honest pro. Like
and I'm sure he's a great guy and all that stuff. Yeah. So I don't want to talk about Reefer. Just one more question I had to ask. Do you think that Kyle Mayers' spot would come under threat if he doesn't perform? Because I'm thinking about the people that aren't doing great right now, particularly in that lower order. You're looking at, I mean, Chase has got a 70 again.
Yeah,
his best score.
No, Chase is locked in for the next 2 years now. That's it.
I know.
I'm not even arguing it no more. He's locked in.
Yeah. Anyway, you just have to accept these things, don't you? But it's Kyle Mayers. Again, some of his dismissals, I feel, have been a little bit not the best. So, do you think that his place is under threat, and if for who?
So, here's the thing with Kyle. I think before I say this, I wanted to just find here it is. I wanted to find this stat first. Right, since Mayers. If I remember rightly, and I haven't got everything in front of me, so I'm talking off the top of my head. Anybody who's in the chat, confirm this for me. Mayer scored his double century at the start of 2022 against Bangladesh. I think the next series against Sri Lanka at home, I think he scored a couple of 50s. Since those are the first 2 Test series of his career. Since then, he's only scored 1 century, no 50s. Okay. That's not good enough. However, Carl Mayer's bowling has been good
very
enough.
good. Yeah.
So here's the thing with Carl Mayers. It's not that I'm saying his position isn't under threat. It should be, in theory. That 100 he scored at home against Bangladesh has basically saved him for a while, right?
Yeah.
Last summer. But Mayers, in a properly balanced side, Mayers and Holder would be battling for the same position. In a properly balanced side.
Because
so I'll leave that to everyone else to decide who's the better bowler, Carl Mayers or Jason Holder. And whoever you think is probably the person who should be playing that. I'm not convinced they should both, in a proper side, both wouldn't be playing. I
suppose I've only I watched West Indies cricket a lot whenever I was younger, and I've just sort of gotten back into it again in the last 2 or 3 years because I'm a masochist and I like the pain. But has Mayers scored? Has Mayers taken many wickets away from home? I can't really remember, because anytime I think of Mayers taking wickets, it's at home.
Who have we played away? He didn't bowl in Australia. Well, he did, but then he got injured. He got a shoulder injury. Where else have we gone? Was he?
We haven't. I mean, there's also another thing. We don't play too many tests.
Yeah, he wasn't in New Zealand in 2020, or I don't remember him being there.
So maybe he hasn't got a chance, I guess. But
I don't actually think we've played many away series, to be honest.
Right.
The ideal place for Carl Mayers will be in England.
Yeah.
If he's in the squad when we come to England, I suspect he'll be getting prodigious movement in England. But I don't know if he'll be in the squad by the time West Indies come to play England again in Test series, So, like I say, I think ultimately your question is valid, but I think, and I know Shane's in the background, I think this came up. I think it was Shane last time round. There are a lot of all-rounders in the West Indies side, and it does Reefer, Chase, Mayers, and Holder. There's far too. I would argue that's 3 all-rounders too many.
Yeah. I think you should just
only
have
one of those
in test match cricket, and also you can look at even because if Moti is now going to be the bowler for a while, even Moti and Joseph can also bat as well. So even with just one all-rounder, I think the squad's still pretty well balanced, where the tail doesn't seem too long to me. But
do you know what? Listen, so Frank, I'm going to bring Shane on next, but the final thing I'll just say in response to that is this actually all goes full circle to what Sheldon said. The whole reason why a lot of these players are in the team, Reefer, Mayers, Chase, etc., is we don't have out-and-out batters. If we had out-and-out batters who would nominally fill a top 6, I don't think you'd see some of these players. If we could realistically say, right, I'm just going to call random names. Darren Bravo 3. Alec, this isn't my team, people. I'm just saying some names. Alec Athanaze 4. Jermaine Blackwood 5. Just random names. Or Bonner 5.
That sounds good, by the way.
But I know those players are there to bat. They're not there to do bits and pieces.
Yeah.
They're not there to bowl 10, 11 overs. They're there to bat. You're supposed to be the batters in the side. Right now, we got a whole bunch of men doing bits and pieces cricket to try and get us by. So,
how good did that top 5 sound, by the way, initially? and you're not going to see, and we're not going to see it probably. But
no, we're never seeing that top 5.
No, we'll never see the top 5. No.
Listen,
big up yourself, Match. Thank you very much, mate.
No worries, man. Thanks for coming on. Yeah.
Bye.
Right, people. Shane, before I bring you on, just because I'm wary of the fact that I'd claimed that this chat was also going to be about the Test series and the Women's T20 World Cup. So very quickly, people, just in 3 minutes, here are the synopsis of what I wanted to say about the other 2 topics. In terms of the Test series, Zimbabwe versus West Indies, it's supposed to rain on day 3, 4, and 5. I think effectively there's not a whole lot to say about this match. We won it on day 1, in essence. Provided the rain holds off enough, we should bowl Zimbabwe out and win this by an innings and something. That's what I'm expecting. At the bare minimum, we'll win by 10 wickets if the rain holds off. So I don't feel like there's a lot to say. The only real talking points that I've got about this second test is Chase with that 70 has now locked himself in. He's now undroppable again for 2 years. That shouldn't be the case, but that's what's going to happen. He will never get dropped again now for a very long time. And that kind of sums up West Indies cricket in a nutshell. Reefer has locked himself in for South Africa by getting another 50. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, 250s in a row, he's locked himself in. I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for West Indies, but you can't drop a man who's made runs. Jermaine Blackwood, his position is going to be under threat. I don't know if he realizes this. Yes, I know he got a 50 in the first test, but West Indies fans always want a scapegoat, right? Blackwood's next on the list. If he doesn't realize it, he is the next scapegoat on the list. He's on the ducking stool. He's gonna start getting dunked. Yes, he's gonna go to South Africa, but you see, if Blackwood don't make runs in South Africa, I think that might be him gone. Who else? What's my other talking points? I think. Do you know what? Let me large up Shannon Gabriel. Didn't take any wickets, but you know what? I thought he bowled some hostile spells. You know. I'd love to see him do that in South Africa. Can his body get him through it? Don't know. But we saw already the difference it made with respect to Kemar Roach, having Gabriel there to bowl at the body, in essence, and kind of rough up the batters, and kind of Roach's medium fast, I'm going to wait for the batter's technique to let them down kind of stuff. So just because Shannon didn't take any wickets, don't fall into the trap of believing that Shannon therefore was ineffective. Those roughing the batters up spells help somebody else get wickets later on, is effectively what I'm saying there. So it was good to see Shannon back in the side. Obviously, Jason took 2. If I was Jason Holder, though, there was a disrespect in this match, and I don't know if many people clocked it. They sent in Joshua to Silva at number 7 and dropped Holder down to number 8. Now, some might say, oh, that's minor. I actually noted that, and I wrote it down in my notes. That's a message to Jason Holder that his batting has fallen off completely now, that they would rather have Josh come ahead of him, who, in fairness, I think it bats better than Jason. Is far more solid than Jason. So if I'm Jason Holder, I've got to take stock of where I'm at. They've disrespected me and told me I'm now a number 8 batter, or number 8. They dropped me down to number 8. They don't respect me. So what are you going to do about it, Jason? What are you going to do about it? Is effectively what I'm saying there. So just some points about the test match. And then in terms of the Women's World Cup, we're going to lose the next match against India. This is what I thought would happen. I thought England would lick us down in the first game, which is what they did. Although credit to the women's team, they've put up probably one of their best batting performances in a long, long time. But then the bowlers didn't really perform. India, probably the 3rd best side in the tournament after Australia and England. I suspect that will be out of the World Cup after the India game. The main issue to talk about with the women's team is the exact issue that I thought would happen. Stefani Taylor hasn't played any cricket in ages, and she's come straight into the side. I don't know if anybody watched that first game, but she faced 15 balls and I think only put bat on 3 of them. She looked like she'd not played cricket in about 2 years, which is about right, basically, right? But we can't drop her. We can't drop her. And it looks like the tactic is essentially have Stefani open at the top. They know she's out of nick. They know she's not really match fit. And I think the whole point is try and get Stefani to bat as the anchor through the whole innings and basically go at 20 or 50 balls or something, and let everybody else just try and play a natural game around her. That's unlikely to have any success, but it's the only way we can really bat with Stefani back in the side, because we can't drop Stefani because, well, that kind of speaks to the talent deficiencies within the side. But we rally around the women's team for the second game. Maybe they can pull off a shock, but let's not cuss them. Let's not cuss them too heavily. It is what it is, you know. The side's in transition. This is what was always likely to happen in the World Cup. It's about what good individual performances we can take from this to then build a side going forward after that. And as Frank says, yeah, we can beat Ireland and Pakistan, but that's not going to be enough to get into the semi-finals of the World Cup. But that's also probably about where we're at as a team right now. So, sorry, I just wanted to run through that, people, because otherwise I would have called the title that. I mean, like, well, I never spoke about that. Anyway, Shane, come on. Time for Shane to come on, people. You lot are going to take me to midnight, aren't you? Blouse and skirt. Shane.
What's up, man?
How you doing, Shane?
What's up, man?
I'm good.
Yeah. Before I even say anything about this topic and talk about the poor selection, I want to ask a question, and I feel like no one answers this question in West Indies cricket, period. In a sport, when you start a season, for example, whether it's football or any sport, you start a season with a target. Some teams are only good enough to finish top 4. Some good teams are have to fight for relegation, etc. When West Indies started this process of Brathwaite's going to be my captain, and these are the players that I'm going to go with, what was the game plan? Because we're not going to make it to the final of the Test Championship, but I feel like, especially over the past, let's say, since Brathwaite's been captain, we're building towards something where we can go, this year we didn't make it, but maybe in the next, maybe we might get closer next year, because I thought we are closer than where everybody thought we would be at this time. Obviously, before the Australia series, we actually had an outside chance of actually making it. I want to know, in your opinion, what is the plan for West Indies what is our objective in Test cricket? What do we want to achieve? When Flower became England coach, in 2 years, we're going to be #1 team in the world. What is our plan or aims for Test cricket?
Good question. I would say we're kind of caught in a flux at the moment, but even before I use it as an excuse, I think even if we weren't caught in a flux, there'd still be no plan. So the first answer to that is, with Andre Coley as interim head coach until the end of the South Africa tour, we can't have a philosophy now going forward or a plan until we know who's going to be the Test head coach going forward, right? That notwithstanding, because of the wider issues around Test cricket in terms of shrinking the game and essentially England, India and Australia playing their own versions of the Ashes in essence and treating that as like super cricket above all else, there's an argument to say that there is a dwindling focus and importance on Test cricket for all the other sides. So you could have a focus, but what does Test cricket really mean in the scheme of things if the world game isn't treating it properly?
The issue that I have with that then, this is the issue that I have with that. If that's the case, then what they've done is even more counterproductive.
Right.
Because if the game is dwindling and away from Test cricket, then we shouldn't be focusing on the future.
Right.
If that's the case, then we shouldn't be focusing on the future. One, I would also say that neither England nor Australia nor India won the last Test championship. It was actually New Zealand who won the last Test championship.
Right, correct.
And no one had actually thought they were going to win it. But what they had was a captain who had a selective amount of players, and they did have a favourable fixture. They had favourable fixtures, but nonetheless, they had, with players, they said they can make a push for something. Why I'm saying this is, and this is nothing against Athens, there is no way you can tell me. There's no way you can tell me. And I just found out about Bono watching this live. There is no way you can tell me that dropping Bono was a logical decision. Because regardless how you look at it, when people say, oh, he doesn't play pace well, the reason why that's such a stupid thing to say is because for so long we saw Campbell open the batting for West Indies and not get dropped once. So you can't. You have to be consistent. For years, I've heard of Tejaran Sanyapur for years, like literally for years. He didn't get a break. I remember when Lakmal only had to bowl. He didn't have to bowl swing, and he was getting Campbell out. He was getting Campbell out as soon as he came on. Campbell was out. For me, you have to have a philosophy. Okay, you're gonna say we're gonna give up Test cricket and we're just gonna focus on a format that we don't even play well at anymore. We played Test cricket, and for me, I've always watched Test cricket. I've always watched cricket, but I'm a traditionalist, and I really have loved the fact that we put a great, philosophy forward for the last few years, which, yes, we're still losing Test matches, but we're much more competitive.
Yeah.
Like, we're so much more competitive. And I just feel like I just don't understand how you make decisions and there's no plans to it. I don't understand how you drop in Kuma Bonner because you think he's not good enough at playing seam. Well, the problem is there's so many players within this team who are not dropping, and they've shown consistently poor performances. I hear a lot of people talk down upon Chase. I actually like Chase as a player, but there was a long time where I didn't think this guy could play anything other than spin. I mean, he got a 100 against Pakistan, 100 against India. I mean, he gets a lot of hundreds against spin. I never thought he could play pace. And he was in the South Africa series, and I know he made 50 in that series in one of the games, but he didn't play pace neither. So I think it's just, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but bro, I found it crazy. I can't even lie to you.
Do you know what? Okay, so I'm going to tell you this. If you ask me what my plan is, if I was involved, I would say that given the World Test Championship exists, the aim for the test side should always be the same. And that is do better than the last one. So the last World Test Championship, I think we came 8th, right?
Yeah.
As things currently stand with South Africa as our last series in it, we're 6th. So to me, I can only look at the kind of cold and hard light of the factual statement of a table and say, well, we've done better than we did in the last edition of the World Test Championship. When the new one starts and the first series in the new one is India versus home, the mission should be, let's at least match what we did last time, if not better. But if you want my honest answer, I don't think anyone's thinking like that.
It's you know why no one's thinking like that? Because if that's the case and people were thinking like that, then we'll be playing more than one home match this year in Test cricket. We are playing one home Test series in Test cricket this year. So for me, it's so disappointing because I literally, for the first time in years, for the last year and a half, or the last season of Test Championship, this team has managed to galvanize my enthusiasm back into Test cricket. Like, I've always liked Test cricket as just through tradition, but it was almost a case of, I know we're going to lose. They've galvanized an enthusiasm and like really fooled my enthusiasm towards this format of the game again. And I just feel like one step forward, 2 steps back. You see people like Tage and Ryan Chandrapal, who, again, if you're a West Indies fan, you love to see players like that. Jaden Sills, another young talent. Azari Joseph is finally getting it together, and he's really showing like talent. For me, and Brathwaite as a captain is also progressing. I just think you want to see us continue to make those steps forward. Don't then erase everything you've done out for everything you've done right in the last year and a half with playing consistent cricket. We played more Test cricket last year than we've done in any other year. I think 5 years, in 5 years, we played a lot of Test cricket last year, and we played a consistent team. The foundations of the team were consistent. And then all of a sudden, I'm not saying you shouldn't bring new players in, but there's no Seals because of injury. There's no Bonner now. He's not going to be in the team. Campbell, I'm glad he's out. He was terrible anyway. And but a lot of the players that we saw, they're just not there. It's disappointing, bro. I can't lie to you. It's disappointing.
So, what do you think? Sorry, let me start again. What rationale do you think? Do you think Sheldon was right at the top? Do you think that the selectors actually used a rationale of this man's going to get hit in South Africa, so we're not taking him? I just want to see what your take is on that, because even like I say, if that's true, I don't see the
take him to
why they
took him to Zimbabwe. There's no point taking him to Zimbabwe. So I think, and I genuinely believe this, it's a case of they saw that Reefer, they gave Reefer a chance, and what they brought Bonner for was, if Reefer don't work, we can play Bonner in the South Africa series. When they realized that Reefer's going to play in the next series because he just made 250s, they said, you know what? We no longer need Bonner. We can send him back home. That's what I think it is. I honestly think, because now they know Reefer's definitely going to play in the next series, they don't need Bonner anymore. So they're just going to send him back.
So check this now, Shane. And this is where the madness comes in, because I know how West Indies cricket works. And if anyone's listening to this guy, Mash, how do you know this is going to happen? Trust me, this is what's going to happen. Say Reefer now starts the 2 Test matches versus South Africa, in South Africa, providing he doesn't get injured. And let's say he basically makes no score above 18.
Yeah.
Right. Injured then come in the summer. They'll drop him, you know. they'll drop him and bring back Bonner or someone like Darren Bravo. So and Darren Bravo, and I'll guarantee you, Athanaze won't play versus India. So they will have called him to South Africa. Then won't treat Athanaze like he's supposed to be the next batter off the rank to then replace Reaper. Yeah. They'll just go back to Bonner.
And it is counterproductive.
Yeah, exactly. None of that makes sense, right? So
none makes sense.
My thing is, if you're calling a man up, call him with a clear developmental path in mind, right? So if Athanaze has been called, I want to believe, but I'm telling you, Shane, this isn't what's happened. If Athanaze has been called, I want to believe that selectors have sat down with him and said, you know what? We're calling you because we now see you as the future of the middle order. The plan is to you're going to carry water versus South Africa, but we'll play you in the tour game. You're going to come in the India series as well. If all goes to plan, you might play a game, but you'll play the tour President's 11 game, and then we'll look to play you in whatever, right? I guarantee you, Shane, not one bit of conversation has gone on. They just called man out. They just called man out.
Before I go though, I wanted to say one thing about the current test match in relation to South Africa. I think I was just looking at something, and I was like, oh, we won a test. We're probably going to win this game against Zimbabwe. I was like, oh, we won against Zimbabwe. What's the difference between this test match and the last test match? The biggest difference is obviously the changes in players, but we batted second. So I'm like, okay, we bowled first. And then I went back, and I was like, the last 5 times we've won, we've bowled first. Now, for me, I think in a team that plays in the Brathwaite style of cricket, where your aim is just to soak up as much deliveries and draw a game before you win a game, I think you have to bat first regardless of because if we have good batting conditions, we rarely make our team only bat once. It's best if you go, if it's good batting conditions, here's 511 runs first innings, take up 2 days, and we'll bat as long as we can and bat for a draw. We might as well just have that philosophy towards everything. We've done that twice against England, and we tried to do it in the first test series against Australia. So going into the game against South Africa, regardless of what the conditions are, I will just try and bowl first. Because for one, I don't trust our bowling lineup to take 10 wickets on the final day. And for two, I don't think we played the right cricket to take the initiative to make 450 on the first day and then bat once. So I would just bowl first going into regardless of the conditions, and just bowl first, even if it's batting conditions. It seems like you're thinking and you're...
Listen, I have to think on that one. I can't give you an immediate answer on. I definitely see where you're coming from. I think what the thing that's in my head is, would I ever trust this side to bat on a last day wicket or even a 4th day wicket? Unless it's an absolute road, would I trust them to be able to survive?
No, but I trust us to survive because we've saved more test matches than we've bowled a team out on the last day.
Okay, yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
So we batted to save the test match against England twice. I remember the Sri Lanka series that we had in the West Indies. We batted to save that test match as well. And I just can't remember the last time we took 10 wickets on the final day. I said that the last time I was on live. Like, I can't remember the last time we took 10 wickets on the final day. And the last few times we've won playing test cricket, we batted last and bowled first.
Good point. I think, to be honest, against Australia, against South Africa, we're probably gonna need a whole lot of luck as well as all of that. I don't expect us
to beat South Africa though.
You don't, or you do?
I don't expect us to beat South Africa. I don't expect us to beat South Africa at all. And I'm so disappointed that I'm going to say this. I no longer care. But let me tell you why I no longer care. Because I don't think, based on the decisions that we've recently found out, that West Indies want to win anything. They don't want to win anything. So therefore, this is literally we're playing just to make up the numbers. So if that's the case, I'm just going to watch as a spectator and not as a person who actually has a genuine interest to believe that we're going to win. Like, even when we versed Australia, there was an outside shot that we could win or survive or even do anything good. But I was watching because I felt like the team was trying to win or do something. And we got to the final day in the first test match and didn't save it, but we tried. But it's just disappointing. I won't lie to you, man. It's disheartening.
Well, like I say, although I'm fairly certain that what I've kind of announced is what's happening with the test squad, let's wait for the official announcement, which will probably come tomorrow. But what I think will be interesting to see and what I encourage everybody to look out for, because, and I don't know how many people didn't notice this prior to the Zimbabwe tour. When they announced the squad for the Zimbabwe tour, there was no press conference. Every previous series in recent times, when they've announced a squad, there's been a press conference to say, right, lead selector's going to be there and whoever else is going to be there to answer your questions. But no press conference, right? Because obviously, and I said, Santoki and I discussed it, and I said, interesting, because there were several kind of issues there that people would have wanted to ask questions about, such as, okay, I know you say you like Roston, but such as, okay, you took Roston to Australia as the frontline spinner. He's still in the squad, but now you've got two frontline spinners. So what's the justification? Like, there would have been some difficult questions that had to be asked, such as, why have you taken two left-arm spinners and so on and so forth?
Even something as basic as the head coach. Like, this is his first test series.
So no press conference. If tomorrow they announce the squad for South Africa and it does have Athanase in and Bonner's out and Akeem Jordan's in and Warwick's out and so on and so forth, there will be questions. But if they don't announce that there's a press conference, that's going to be very, very interesting. And that, to me, will be telling that, boy, we don't even know how to justify. We don't know how to justify
honestly,
we don't know how to
I
justify
don't
nothing.
think the administrators in West Indies actually care about the progression of West Indies cricket. I genuinely don't. I feel it's more about building relationships. I genuinely believe that it's more about building relationships, not upsetting people. Obviously, I'm pretty sure, just like every other sport, you get a lot of money from certain sponsors. So I assume if you got a certain amount of Bajan people in the team, it looks good. If you got a certain amount of Jamaican people in the team, it looks good. So I get that. Really and truly, West Indies, and my dad says this to me all the time, from the top to the bottom, it's just a bunch of mercenaries. You know, it's never about the actual progression, because for me, I'm still disappointed that we're not playing enough test cricket this year after the year what we had last year. I mean, Tejan Chandrapur at the end of this year is literally going to, at maximum, play 6 test matches. 6. Like, how do you expect him to progress when his next test match after India is all the way in Australia, like, what, 6-7 months after? I don't even know how long. I mean, how do you expect anyone to progress like that? For me, there's no care about the progression of West Indies cricket other than just making money.
All I will say, I hear that. What I will say, I think there's 2 points I'll make before I come to Mr. Mr. Lover. I know you're in the background. I would just make 2 points. One is that we recorded an episode with Johnny Grave, the CEO of Cricket West Indies, and we asked him those questions, in fairness. And I think we can't just blame it on Cricket West Indies for the lack of test cricket. I think there's now a worldwide issue around test cricket. And even with the best will in the world, if West Indies wanted to play more test cricket, if the other boards aren't willing to do anything about that either, like, so basically a cricket calendar essentially goes as follows. What's the ICC tournament for that year? Right, that's in there. The next, in fact, probably not even that. When's IPL? Right, that's in there. So that's the first thing. What's the ICC tournament? That goes in there. And then it's about, right, how do we get a bilateral series with other nations in there, bearing in mind that India, England, Australia will first and foremost want to play each other so they can maximize all their money. Do you see what I mean? So I think in Cricket West Indies' defense, there's a wider world issue and therefore a scheduling issue to kind of get around. And then the second thing I would say, which is nothing to do with the ICC and world cricket, which is where I agree with you, I would call it this. In West Indies or in the Caribbean, it's politics first, cricket second. And that relates to the politics of the region, the politics of having to please certain people within the region, the politics of having to without going into detail, but the politics of agreeing to play cricket in one place but not in another. It's all about schmoozing. And we are at a disadvantage in West Indies cricket in that compared to every other test playing nation, we have to do that across a whole bunch of different countries and nations to try and coordinate to move cricket forwards. And unfortunately, I think we probably have it harder than most. That doesn't mean it's insurmountable, but I think it's a reality that makes moving West Indies cricket forward exceptionally difficult. And that's anybody who comes into power. They're going to have to play the politics game first before you can put anything meaningful in to fix cricket. Listen, Shane, I know Mr. Lover's in the background. Final thing, people, just want to say, because while Shane was talking, I said, let me bring it up on the screen. So when South Africa toured West Indies in 2021, I said this is what I thought happened. These were the actual scores. In the first test, we made 97 and 162. In the second test, when Bonner wasn't there because he'd got concussed in the first test, we made 149 and 165, right? Just to then give people the series averages, the West Indies averages, nobody in the West Indies team averaged above 24.
Can I ask a question?
Test series. Yeah, go on.
Can I ask you a question? Did we bat first or bowl first? I just want to know. I don't know.
Hold on. Let me go back. Let me go back and just double check that in both matches. So in the first test, I think we batted first in that, in the first test we batted first. I don't know if I need to go back and check if we won the toss, but we definitely batted first. I think we chose to be fair. And in the second test, South Africa batted first in the second test.
South Africa batted first in the second test.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to know. But
like I say, in terms of just the stats, the only reason I bring that up is when your top player in that series only averages 24, this goes full circle to the point I made. If we're going to make points about Bonner can't play high pace, I need people to call me somebody who can play high pace.
I think Tage and Brathwaite done well in Australia.
Yeah, no, to be fair, in Australia, Tage and Brathwaite showed that their kind of grind ball tactics, they can at least bat a long time. But I think
Bonner can as well, though, because Bonner didn't get out in South Australia. He got hit and he still batted through until lunch or whatever, and he took up a lot of delivery. I mean,
it is what it is, man. It is what it is.
But yeah, man, thanks for having me.
No worries, man. Thank you for coming.
Can I leave one thing with your team? Yeah. If Holder doesn't make runs, he's due a drop as well. I don't care what anyone says. He's due a drop as well. Holder's definitely due a drop. He hasn't taken a 5-wicket in like 100 years, and he hasn't made a 50 in about 150 years. So this guy, he's due a drop as well.
Listen, let me put a call through to Mia Motley and let Barbados deal with you, man.
But thanks for having me, man.
No worries. Right, Mr. Lover, I don't know if you're still there, but you're the last guest on. I said you lot weren't going to take me to midnight, but here we are, 10 minutes to midnight, UK time. Last guest of the evening, people. Mr. Lover, the floor is going to be all yours. Before I bring him on, though, people, like, share, subscribe, all of that. Yes, Mr. Lover, how you doing?
Good night.
Good night.
But the rumors as well.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be surprised about the Alec Atkins selection. However, I am very surprised about Akeem Jordan selection. I was saying that he would be called up in the next 3 years or so, but I never expected it to be so soon. I expected to see him in conditions like England, where he could swing the ball both ways, and against New Zealand.
You still there? We've lost your audio, Mr. Lover.
You're still there?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
You were saying that you'd expect him to play like in conditions like England and New Zealand. We've got some audio issues, people. Mr. Lover, I'll keep talking, and when you think I can't hear you at the moment, but when you're back, let me know when you're back. I'll expand on Mr. Lover's points in the meantime. So a lot of people have spoken about Athenaeus and Bonner and so on and so forth, but to just kind of take Mr. Lover's original point, I'm surprised more people haven't spoken about Akeem Jordan. I think that is a controversial pick as well. Yes, he gets the ball to move both ways. I think it was Mr. Lover who, don't know, somebody spoke to me, I can't remember who actually, who made the point that maybe Akeem Jordan should be called up to the ODI squad. This was long before anything to do with hearing that Akeem Jordan might be going to South Africa. And I said, yeah, actually, I agree with that. Because if you look at Akeem Jordan's Super 50 stats over the last 3 years, yeah, he's somebody who does. So if Akeem Jordan had suddenly got called up for the ODI leg of the South Africa tour, you wouldn't hear me saying that's controversial under any circumstance whatsoever, because I think he's been putting in the work in the domestic championship, Super 50 championship, to justify him getting a chance. What I can't rationalize is how he's jumped the queue in red ball cricket. Unless you lot are willing to say to me that somebody taking 12 wickets in the first 2 games of a domestic championship is enough to immediately catapult them into the test side, and you then have to say also off the back of what he's done with the white ball, that's enough. Fine, but I just don't know what message you're then giving to bowlers who would have thought that they were the next in line, particularly, like I say, someone like Marquino Mindley, who we flew halfway around the world to join an Australia tour. Yes, he got injured, only to then say in the next available series, oh, we don't want you to come, we're going to take somebody else. Like, again, there's no kind of proper rational thought there to help me understand what the kind of selection process is. Mr. Lover, you're still on the screen, but I can't hear you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove you. What the best thing to do, Mr. Lover, is probably to come out and come back in, you know. That's probably how your audio will work. Yes, Mr. Lover will try and do that. So yeah, so as Mr. Lover says, I think that's the kind of wider point about what's the rationale and justification to explain Akeem Jordan. Listen, I'm gonna throat is dry out here. I'm gonna give it like a couple more minutes just to see if Mr. Lover comes back in, people. But ultimately, thank you as ever for those who've joined in the call-in show. We've gone for an hour and 30 minutes. We've gone for an hour and 30 minutes. We've spoken about the test selection controversy ahead of the West Indies probably announcing their squad tomorrow. In fact, one second. Let me just see if Mr. Lover is coming back. Let me give him the link in the chat. I did say Mr. Lover gets to end the show. Let me see if he comes back in, people, and then we will end the live. I'd like to know, people, though, those who are watching this back, in the comments below, tell me what your 11 would be for the next West Indies Women's World Cup side, against India. I'm still not convinced that we've got our 11 in the appropriate order. I don't think I can't blame Courtney Walsh. I think they're just trying lots of different things, and it's hard because the squad just doesn't have the quality to be able to put together what I would call a coherent 11 where you can be guaranteed that everybody can play yes, they played better against England with the bat, but particularly with the bat, just playing a coherent role. It will always be difficult for this West Indies side to put together a complete performance because in my mind, we don't have a complete team. But anyways, Mr. Lover, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good, man. Go for it.
Okay. Now, let me just say this with regards to the Athenaeus and Jordan stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hello? You there?
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
I was saying maybe they're picking them in mind based on the Super 50 performance so they can get acclimatized to the condition as well to play in the one-day squad, probably as well.
Okay, that's an interesting call. I hadn't considered that, in fairness. That would make sense to me. Okay, that's a good point.
But this whole Athenaeus being picked and Bonner being dropped, I think if that was the case, they should have left Bonner home ahead of the Zimbabwe series. And Demo said it on the last live. If Bonner does not play, I doubt they're going to pick him for Australia, and I doubt he's going to play in Australia. That's what Demo said, if I can recall right. So
Yes, he did. You mean South Africa, but yes, Demo did make that point. Yes.
So basically, it's not a dull day. It's not surprising. Just going to wait for the confirmation and see if it is actually true or not.
Do you agree with my point, though? And this is my only bone of consternation here. Do you see my point that they must not have been considering Athenaeus until they just saw him make some runs in the first 2 rounds of the first class championship? Because my thing is, if they were considering him before this, they would have taken him to Zimbabwe anyway. Or do you disagree with that?
Well, tell you what, in the first 2 rounds, he made a century and 2 or 3 half centuries, if I'm correct.
Yes.
So probably that has really forced the hands of the selectors, probably. Or maybe they had him in mind but wasn't confident on him as yet.
Right. Okay. Do you know what? If there is a press conference and Desmond Haynes says that, I'm willing to accept that argument. If that would be the best get out clause they could use. They could say, you know what, he was always on our radar, but we were just waiting to see if he would fulfill it in the first 2 rounds. But then, like I say, Mr. Lover, I would expect journalists to then turn around and go, so what's the plan now with Bonner then? Is his career done? Because what I would love to know is, what have they said to Bonner? Now Bonner's gone home. What did, when Desmond Haynes or whoever rang Bonner up and said, you know what, we're not taking you to South Africa, I want to know what conversation they had. Did they say to him, well, boy, you might not make it back in now? Like, what's the plan now with Bonner?
Well, I honestly think Bonner's career might be over, but the only person that could actually answer that is himself, Desmond Haynes, and the interim head coach, Andre Coley.
Mm.
And to think that Andre Coley is Jamaican and this is happening out of the blue, although after the concussion and he was not dismissed, that he's just out of the squad completely now, is really disheartening to see.
If Bonner plays and again, remember this, there's no official confirmation, but this is what we're all led to believe. If Bonner comes back and plays the next 3 rounds of the West Indies Championship and makes big runs, do you just put him straight back in against India?
Honestly, it's going to be a tough decision because you have an old veteran performing now in Darren Bravo. So maybe Darren Bravo could even leapfrog him. So I'm going to leave that open and see how it goes. I won't answer that confidently yet.
Listen, Mr. Lover, I know we had some technical issues at the beginning, but thank you as ever for coming through. Your comments are always valued and welcomed. Listen, I owe you
one more question before you go.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Why would you work with Jamel Warrican and then just drop him? Why you didn't play him in not even one of the matches?
My only answer to that is I can only assume that they only took Jamel Warrican as an injury cover if Multi was to break down. That's the only thing I can think of. But then here's the counter argument to that. If you only took somebody as an injury cover, why not just take another pacer? I don't know. There's just
exactly.
It's a question I can't answer, Mr. Lover, because I don't. At the time when Warrican got called, I said, well, he's unlikely to play. So what are we taking him for? And then we always looked like we were one pacer light, right? To offer variety. But maybe they will just say, you know what, it is what it is. In the same way how Devon Thomas is cover for Josh Da Silva, or if we had like freak injuries like we did in Australia, maybe that's just why you take someone else. But I just would have thought we could have taken somebody else as a more versatile pick who could realistically have got into the squad, into the team, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyhow, Marsh, thank you for having me on. I will hit you up after the live.
No
Thanks.
worries, man. Thanks as ever. Thanks as ever for coming through.
Respect.
No worries. Right, people. We started at about 10:25, and I said, "You lot ain't taking me to midnight tonight." I'm looking at the time; it's 5 past midnight. Ah, boy! But thank you. Athena says we need women selectors. Well, is Anne Brown selecting the right squad for the West Indies women's team though? We have to think about that as well. That's another question for another day. But thank you as ever, people, for coming through. Thank you for anybody who joined the live at any particular point in time. In terms of what's coming up on the horizon, obviously, day 3 tomorrow, West Indies versus Zimbabwe versus West Indies. On Wednesday, West Indies women versus India women. There is a press conference tomorrow. Courtney Walsh is doing a press conference tomorrow. I think I'll be along for that. And hopefully we should get an announcement tomorrow with regards to the official confirmation of the West Indies squad to tour South Africa. So stay locked in for all of that, people. Follow Caribbean Cricket Podcast and all the different handles: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Substack, all of that. Share what we do. If you're in the Caribbean or the United States, enjoy the rest of your evening. If you're in the UK, you should be in bed. I should be in bed. And if you're in India, well, boy, it's like 4 a.m. or something. And if you're in Australia, New Zealand, boy, I don't even know what time it is. But wherever you are, big up all of yourselves. I'll see you soon. Thank you as ever. Good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.